Welcome to the Business of Story podcast, where the world's best storytellers from business, Hollywood, and beyond teach you how to use stories to communicate and connect with your customers. The Business of Story is sponsored by ACT, the best-selling customer management software for small business, Oracle Marketing Cloud, enabling businesses to target, engage, convert, analyze, and use marketing technology to deliver a better customer experience. Sixter, helping clients maximize the impact of every single email sent. And by Signal Labs, the real-time cross-media story tracking platform. Here's your host, Park Howell from Park & Co. and today's special Business of Story guest.
Welcome, everyone, to another legendary episode of Business of Story. And I really mean that this week. If you happen to be a B2B business marketer, content creator, copywriter, marketing director, content marketer, anyone with a professional services firm, and your job is to sell, then we have a show for you. Ardath Albee. She is an amazing B2B digital strategist and CEO of Marketing Interactions. She's here today on the Business of Story to share with us her more than 30 years of marketing insight on how to become more relevant with your business storytelling to attract and retain amazing customers through the stories you craft and tell. And of course, those stories always start by knowing your audiences in a godlike way, by creating customer and buyer personas. That's how you do it. So on today's show, you're going to learn why your personas are critical to the complex B2B sell, how a simple exercise called the pronoun shift will have a profound impact on the relevance of your content, what the Greek legend of Narcissus has to do with your brand. That's right, your brand. And why it's important to turn one-off campaigns into serial business stories for true customer engagement. Plus, Ardath gives us a ton of tips on how we can start creating our own buyer and customer personas directly following this episode. But following the episode, not during the episode. We want you here for the whole time. So let's get after it with author, persona creator, and digital story strategist, Ardath Albee. Ardath, welcome to the Business of Story.
Thanks, Park. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to have you on the program. You know, you've got these two wonderful books out, E-Marketing Strategies for the Complex Sale, and the one that I just recently finished up, Digital Relevance. And what I love about it is two things. Number one, it opens up this whole new world of how to connect with customers on a very human level, which we need to do now more than ever in business-to-business marketing. But then it also opens up this whole scary world of, oh my goodness, I need to be doing way more of this for myself and my clients. I mean, is that a reaction that you get when you're working out there?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny you should say that. I've received a couple of tweets from people who've read the book saying that the equivalent of "you're blowing my mind," and that kind of thing. And I just keep trying to look forward to how do we really evolve and get beyond where we are today to drive growth for our companies.
Yeah. Tell us about your work, Ardath. How did you arrive at what you do today? And give our listeners a good insight into what it is that you do as a strategist in B2B marketing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting, actually. Back in 2000, I was running a technology startup company. So think first ever iteration of marketing automation designed to also run your website. But if you remember back in 2000, companies had corporate brochure sites essentially as websites. And so they'd move that content into the new technology and they'd say, hey, nothing happened. And I started looking at their content and I thought, well, geez, no wonder. And so I started helping them revise their content to speak to their customers, and they started seeing change happen. And so as I spent more and more time helping the customers of the tech company, and I was the only non-techie there to run the company, I started helping them. I realized I could create a career out of something that I absolutely loved and was passionate about. And in 2007, I jumped and started my own consulting business, and it's been nonstop ever since.
And what exactly is it you do through your business?
I help B2B companies with complex sales create personas and content marketing strategies that actually turn prospects into buyers and convince customers to stay. So it's all about telling that story that engages them. And then with B2B companies, most times the buying process is longer. So you have to sustain the story over a protracted period of time, whether that's 9 months or 2 years or even longer in some cases. And that takes a lot of finesse and effort to figure out how to do that and actually keep people moving forward and building stronger intent and actually getting them to accept change, which is what buying is all about.
And what is your definition of a complex sale?
A complex sale is something beyond a transaction. So it generally involves a committee of people spending, usually it's a high ticket item, and it's something that's strategic to the company in most cases. So think big technology solutions. I work for a lot of technology companies. Also complex installations such as contact centers. One of my companies sells contact centers to the Fortune 50. And that's a huge sale and takes a lot of information and confidence building and knowledge transfer in order to help companies make the decision to change vendors. So it's really fascinating. And for me, that's what I love, are those in-depth stories where there's a lot of conversations that need to happen, a lot of information that needs to be exchanged, a lot of people involved that you have to persuade, not just one, but many.
Mm-hmm. And in your book, you talked about, and I guess it goes back to the 2000 brochureware websites, that campaigns in this case are obsolete because they're sort of a one and done. They have that finite lifespan. But what you talk quite a bit about is this storytelling across channels, platforms, to different audiences, having a consistent theme, but reshaping the genre of each story depending on who you're talking to and what they need to be doing next, I guess, in the conversion funnel.
Right, exactly. So if you really think about campaigns, and I did a lot of thinking about campaigns when I was writing the book, the problem with them is that they're really constructs that we as companies created, or marketers, so that we could put a little box around what we're doing. So we had a way to say, here's what we did, here's what we accomplished, and that kind of thing. It had nothing to do with buyers. There's no time I've ever heard a buyer say, please give me 3 touches and a sales pitch, And so the problem is that they spend a lot of effort and energy getting somebody to engage with whatever that campaign is. And then once they've established engagement and interest, the thing ends. Mm-hmm. And so when you do that, what you do is you halt all the momentum that your prospects have, or that they've developed. And then you launch your new theme. And when you do that, you're now changing the context, changing the conversation that you've established. And you're giving them the opportunity to say, wait a minute, you are no longer relevant to me. I'm going to go find somebody who's still talking about this thing I was interested in. And why in the world would we ever want to do that? So what we need to do as marketers is look at what is the whole end-to-end process and how do we facilitate that, not just one step of it at a time.
And is a campaign, is that just kind of a throwback to the old way of advertising and marketing when the brands controlled the mass media, so that you get away with running TV, print, direct mail, whatever? But in this day and age, when the masses are the media, it has turned our ability to communicate and sell in the old-fashioned campaign way on its head. And we need to figure out how to interact with people online and in person by continuing that story around the sale, around the brand versus the one-off campaign.
Right, exactly. So if you think about it, in the past, we were really, as marketers and companies, able to orchestrate that conversation because we decided what information we wanted to let out there, right? Mm-hmm. And what information people had to come to us to get. Well, now information's everywhere. So your buyers don't have to get it from you. They can get it from whoever they want. And in many cases, they can get it from informational sources that aren't vendors. And so we're no longer in control of what information is out there. So we have to figure out, how do we become really useful to these people? Because they no longer need us, essentially. They can find out everything they need to know without ever talking to us, which is why you hear those statistics bandied around, like 57% of the way through the process before they reach out to a vendor. And Forrester is now saying it's 90%.
90, wow.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's scary and exciting because what it really requires a brand marketer to do, especially in the B2B realm, is to think of their sales process like an author would think about telling a story and taking customers on this journey, on both the buying journey as well as the customer journey once they've bought in, and think about the highs and lows of that journey and where you can be delivering relevant story points throughout that make sense to them. I had someone the other day tell me, brands are story makers, but our customers are truly the storytellers. And that has never been as strong and relevant as it is in today's society, I believe. Are you seeing that in your work as well?
Well, I'm seeing that it should be that way. So, but that it really isn't yet quite that way because companies still can't relinquish or support the customer in being the storyteller. So one of the things that I work with my clients to learn is that we have to figure out how do we make our prospects, our buyers, the hero of their own story, right? So if you think about it and you go back to perhaps Joseph Campbell's storytelling theory or methodology, the prospect needs to accomplish something, right? And they go out and they figure out, geez, I don't know what I need to know, right? I'm hitting obstacles. This isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And they encounter these obstacles that they have to overcome in order to keep moving forward. Well, if you think about it in the simplest terms, what they need to be able to do that is a mentor. And so we need to learn to become the mentors that provide the information, tools, and skills that our prospects need in order to complete the journey, right, and get to the other side. And so it's the simplest way to think about it is if you think about the story of Cinderella, she needed to get to the ball in order to win the prince, right? And so who helped her? The fairy godmother. And so we need to essentially, as funny as it may sound, become the fairy godmothers in order to help our prospects get to their end goal.
And what keeps brands from doing that? Why do the brands, especially in the B2B world, think that they are the center of the story versus being that mentor to help out the customer?
Because brands, for all intents and purposes, are still so product focused that they think they're the ones coming in to save the day. They think that because their customers bought their solution, that's what, that they were the ones responsible for making their customers successful. And so they talk about it in that way, like we are the leading provider of, we are the best choice you can make. I mean, it's craziness. And so they don't really think about that the true story is the capabilities that their customers gain by using their products. So it's really all about the customer. It's not about the product. They could buy somebody else's product and probably do the same thing. So we're failing to differentiate ourselves as B2B companies because we're focused on either trying to tell a better story than the competition or trying to prove that our product is the best. And nowhere in either of those two scenarios is the customer. So that's why I talk about customer obsession and relevance so much in my new book, is because we have to put the customer first in relation to everything, or we're not going to be relevant enough to sustain attention and engagement.
Absolutely. And in your book, you have the relevance maturity matrix, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's a quad split, 4 squares. In the upper left-hand corner, you have shifting relevance. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's irrelevance. Upper right is radical relevance. And in the lower right is social relevance. Can take us through that a little bit, because I found it very interesting that so many of these brands are still languishing in the shifting relevance or irrelevance, and they only have to do a few simple things to get put over into that other side where you're ultimately trying to level up to radical relevance.
Right, exactly. Well, when I was thinking about this and thinking about the work I do with my customers, my clients, one of the things is that being product-centric is a habit. It's a mindset. We know our company better than we know our customers. We know our products better than we know what our customer needs and their perspective. And so those are the things we tend to talk about, but they're not relevant anymore because nobody cares. They care about what's in it for them, right, and how they're going to get there. And so we need to develop a process to shift this mindset. And what I came up with was the relevance maturity matrix. And, if you look at irrelevance, that's all the product focused stuff and the thumping your own chest stuff that a lot of companies still do. And it's just the broadcast, here's the title and a link to something we wrote. Or here's our latest customer acquisition or whatever, and nobody cares about that stuff, and they just keep doing it. And then eventually companies start to see the light, and they start to get a little bit more customer oriented. And then they move into shifting relevance, where sometimes they're relevant and sometimes they're not, because they keep shifting back and forth because they haven't figured out how to change that habit, or they haven't really figured out what it means to do so. And it can also be represented by one marketing team gets it and they're relevant and customer focused, but another marketing team is not. And both messages are seen in the marketplace by the same prospects. So it gives you that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde effect, where you wonder, what is this company really about? Is this my experience? Is this going to be my experience working with them? That sometimes it's great and sometimes it sucks,
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, as we start to develop these tools that I shared in the book. So moving from irrelevance to shifting relevance is all about listening and really starting to understand what can make you more relevant in the marketplace. And then as you get to more social relevance, you start realizing that it's about the dialogue and the conversation more than it is about just pushing stuff out there. And how do you extend that conversation, and what does that look like, and what does it mean from a marketing perspective? And and then as you move into radical relevance, you're able to envision scenarios where you can actually build that process of interaction that grows across engagement across the entirety of the buying continuum.
I think you hit it right on the head. It's turning these folks from being navel-gazing brands to here's what we make, and turn them into outward-focused brands with that concept of here's what we make happen for you in your life. They don't have to look any further than just compare an Apple to a PC. Both of them are in a commoditized business of selling you a computer, but PCs are very functional, utilitarian. The world of the PC just hasn't gotten down to the emotional level, in my humble opinion, where certainly Apple, that's all they've ever been. Selling you essentially the same product that operates just a little bit differently, but Apple is very much that outside focus, where the rest of the PC makers are more internally focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny the way that this company focus shows up in some of the marketing that is being done, where it starts out with all the intentions in the world of being persona driven and really addressing needs. And I'll give you an example. I just worked on a project with a company, and they are trying to embrace personas and learn what the difference is. And so we're creating a piece of content for a specific persona, and we're all the way at the end of the article, and it's been through massive revisions and reviews and feedback because everybody wants to get involved in it. And finally, the end result is they say, we haven't mentioned our company once. How are people going to know that what we're talking about is what we actually provide? And I said to them, you're looking at this in a Word document, but it will be on your website, which is totally company branded. Why would they think you're talking about something you don't do?
Mm-hmm.
And even with that rationale, they still insisted that we do another rewrite and get the brand name in there several times so that people would really be sure that they're talking about something that they enabled their clients to achieve. And I just couldn't fathom,
Right.
why this was so difficult to understand. If you look at the context of a website, it is totally branded. Nobody's confused about where they are or who's talking to them. So why would you need to insert yourself into the content? And so that's how difficult it is for people to make this change.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes no sense to me at all. And no matter what I tried, they still insisted that we needed to do the rewrite and insert the company name and insert things about the company, that this brand makes it possible for you to do this within the context of the content, which, in my opinion, took the content down a few notches in relevance because it almost turned into a sales pitch there at the end. But it was interesting to me that they just couldn't see the difference.
It dehumanizes it. It really does. It just takes that human level off of it a little bit. It's that old saying of every client, make my logo bigger. And you say, but it's the only thing on the page.
I know. And it still amazes me that companies look at it that way, and they're so concerned that their brand still needs to be in the middle of everything.
Yeah. On page 16 of Digital Relevance, I think you offer up the simplest advice that I think is really profound and powerful, and something that every copywriter should keep in mind and every brand manager should keep in mind. And it's called the pronoun shift. Can you share with us what the pronoun shift is? Because I think it's just a wonderful waypoint to guide writers in content development.
Well, sure. So when companies write about who they are and what their story is and everything else, they talk about we and our in relation to themselves. Nobody cares. And so what we need to start doing is thinking in terms of you and yours in relation to your buyers and customers. And so the test for this is go to any company's website and click on their About Us page and look at how they talk about why they're there and what they do. And most times it is a representation of chest thumping. It's all about we are this, we are the leading provider of, we are here to ensure that our solutions make our customers the best. And they may think that sentence is customer centric, but it's really not, because they're saying we're the hero of the story. We're the ones who are going to make you successful. It's not about their customers at all. And so one time I was doing a workshop for a client, and we had the entire marketing team in the room, and we were talking about their personas and their content. And they were sharing, in this case, an email copy with me. And we spent almost an hour trying to get them to see that the difference in the way they said something reoriented the whole thing to about them instead of about the customer. And it was a matter of 2 words. And I was trying to get them to see it for themselves instead of me telling them. And it took almost an hour of discussion for them to get it, because they couldn't see the difference, because in their eyes, they were talking about their customers. The problem is they were talking about them, not to them.
Right.
And so it was as simple as changing 2 words to make it work, but they could not see how they were missing it. And so I think it was a really valuable experience for them, no matter how frustrated they got in that hour, but it took an hour.
We've got a throwdown here then. That's perfect. I'm going to go back to my site, and I encourage all the listeners to do the same. Read through your content and see if you have a pronoun shift that is direly needed in your life, switching the we and ours to you and yours. I think that's just a fabulous test of how well we are actually connecting on the customer's terms versus just blathering on about our own brands and our own services.
You make a really good point. Quite often when I'm speaking at conferences, one of the things I'll ask marketers in the room is, give me a show of hands for how many of you actually experience your content in the way your customers do. And very few hands go up in the room. So how many of us as marketers sign up for our own nurturing programs, and get the content that we send out to our customers in the context in which they receive it? And if you step into your customer's shoes and you're on the receiving end of that, does it work?
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
And so it's one thing to look at your content in a Word document, and it's entirely another to experience receiving that email, looking at it in your inbox, thinking, would I click on this if I were them? And then what does that experience look like when I click through to the article or the web page or whatever? And what else does it ask me to do? What else does it give me? Is it a satisfying experience? Am I getting anything out of this? And marketers don't do that. And quite frankly, it's a big miss, because the experience of it can be quite different than what we think it is in our heads.
Yeah. And is it simply that this is all so new, especially given technology, that us marketers have not had a chance to catch up with it, or we've been unwilling to learn new tricks to make this happen?
Well, one of the things I discovered in my research when I was writing the book, as well as I've seen it with my customers, is that marketers don't get any training. 82% of marketers in a research study that was conducted a couple years ago do not get any training. They learn on the job as they go. And so if you think about it, content marketing came around, and it didn't take anything off our plates as marketers. It added to it. And we were told, go forth and create great, compelling content. Nobody ever told you what that was. And so they don't know. And so I've watched over the years as Content Marketing Institute does research every year. And back in 2011, I think it was 41% of marketers said they were effective with their content marketing. This last research, that the 2016 research, came back and said only 30 thought they were effective. But was even more surprising than that is 55% of them said they didn't know what an effective content marketing program looked like.
Mm-hmm. That's not surprising.
But it's a bit crazy considering the amount of money we're spending on content, and that, 88% of B2B marketers are doing content marketing, but most of them don't know what it really should look like to be effective.
Right.
And so we need to start training our people, and marketers are trying to shift. I mean, they're some of the most engaged audiences at conferences I've seen, and they're really actively trying to learn. They don't get the training or the support. In fact, if we continue to measure performance of our marketing teams based on the number of leads generated rather than the quality of leads generated or other things that relate to content marketing, such as moving pipeline, and different things like that, then they're going to continue to go generate, in quotes, leads, which are contact form completions, essentially, that get handed over to the sales team. So if we don't change the way we evaluate performance and the way we train our marketing teams, how can we expect them to be effective with a new skill set as we move forward?
Yeah, without question. And of course, this podcast, being the business of story, is all about showing people and introducing them to our guests like yourself that teach people how to tell stories. But it doesn't matter how good of a story you tell or create. If it is not on point with the audience, you lose that relevance. And so every great story begins with truly understanding that customer persona, or as Robert McKee would say, the famous screenwriting coach, you have to know your audience in a godlike way. What is the story that you are going to be sharing with them? And you also have to know the characters within the story to that same extent. So I'd like to take a break at this moment so that we can share some of the stories from our wonderful sponsors. And Ardath, when we come back, I would really like to focus on customer personas. How do you do them? How do people find the time to get them done? How do you know they're accurate? How do you know they're really going to inform you in the right way? And then how do you put them to use in your business? So I know that's a lot of hows for you. I'll give you a few seconds to think about that, but we'll be back right after these messages. Are you keeping track of sales leads in a spreadsheet? Or worse, Post-it notes all over your desk? Well, there's a better way, and it doesn't involve spending a fortune on complex CRM software. For over 25 years, ACT has been the #1 best-selling contact and customer management software. It's super affordable and easy to use. ACT helps individuals, small businesses, and sales teams organize prospect and customer details in one place. It helps market products and services more effectively, and most importantly, ACT drives sales. So try ACT free for 30 days by visiting actstory.com and sign up for a chance to win a pair of Bose Quiet Comfort 20i acoustic noise canceling headphones, a $299 value. Again, that's actstory.com. Welcome back to the Business of Story, and our guest today, Ardath Albee, the CEO of Marketing Interactions, who specializes in B2B marketing strategy. It's great having you on the show, Ardath. I don't know, have you heard the story? Do you know the story of Narcissus? I think it's a perfect time to share it with our crowd.
Yeah, let's share the story.
Yeah. Well, Narcissus was, a Greek legend, a very brave hunter and spectacularly handsome. Unlike me, that really has more of a voice for podcasts. He was spectacularly handsome. One day he was walking in the forest when this mountain nymph, Echo, saw him and fell deeply in love. Now, Narcissus felt the presence of Echo and called out, "Who's there?" Echo repeated, "Who's there?" The exchange went on for days, which intrigued, as you might also imagine, sort of annoyed Narcissus. Then the shy Echo revealed herself and expressed her love for him. Narcissus rejected her outright. She fled embarrassed and heartbroken and spent the rest of her life in the lonely glens until nothing but an echo sound remained of her. Now, Nemesis, the goddess of revenge, learned of Echo's slight and set out to punish Narcissus for his callousness. Nemesis lured him to a pond where he was greeted by his magnificent reflection. He was transfixed by his image. For days, Narcissus sat by the pool and stared at himself. When he realized his love could never be addressed, he committed suicide. Thus, the death of Narcissus. I love this story from Greek mythology because I think it talks about the narcissism of today, reaching way back to the gods of the selfie. And I think it even points to the narcissism that we see in brands, that they are still so transfixed on themselves that they haven't opened themselves up to truly who their audiences are and what their audiences care about. So we don't want brands to fall by the wayside and kill themselves as they're, looking at their glory in the reflecting pond. And it seems like the only way to get around that is to truly understand and appreciate the echoes in our lives, those customers in our lives. And you can really only do that through customer personas. You are an expert at creating these. So how do us busy brand folk take the time to go out and create a persona and make sure that those personas are accurate and something that will truly inform our storytelling moving forward?
That's a big question. I love the ancient selfie, though.
Yeah. The Greeks told us way back when, stop the selfie, get rid of the selfie stick.
It's interesting. One of the issues we have as marketers in creating our own personas is that we tend to create them based on our assumptions and our knowledge because we think we really know what we're doing and who our customers are. And so a lot of times companies will come to me for content strategy and they'll say, yeah, we have personas. And they send them over and I take a look at them. And they're not really built in a way that's going to inform their content strategy effectively. And part of the reason is because marketers don't invest the time and energy and effort to create personas properly. So, for example, a lot of times, and research reports have come out recently that show this, they will create them based on internal data only. And the problem with that is that there's a bias involved in internal information. And if you put your marketing team in a room with a pizza over lunch and say, okay, let's build a buyer persona, you're going to get what you think to be true, not what necessarily is true. And a lot of the mistakes that marketers make are because they look at their personas as if they are themselves. So, for example, and I've sat in marketing meetings where this happens, somebody will throw out an idea and somebody else will say that won't work. I hate that idea. But their buyer might love that idea. But what happens is they're evaluating things based on what they like or what they think will work rather than what they should know will work or be relevant. And so the reason they do this is because it's, number one, and I still run into this today, amazingly enough, there are marketing teams who are not allowed to talk to their customers. The sales side or whoever won't allow them to talk to customers. I'm grappling with it right now in the middle of a project. We're just kind of stopped in our tracks because we're having trouble getting whoever is the gatekeeper to allow us access to the customers. Well, that's craziness. The other thing is they don't know how to conduct interviews. They don't know what they should be looking for or how to ask the right questions. Or in some cases, they've conducted the interviews and they send me the transcripts. And as you're reading the transcripts, you can see them leading the witness, right? So they're asking questions in a way that is directing the customer they're interviewing to answer them in a particular way. And that just, they're trying to confirm what they assume to be true rather than really learning about what they may not know. And so that skews the whole thing also. And so it makes it more difficult. And I've been through situations where what we discovered in customer interviews is so different from what they thought that I've had a CMO actually stand up in the room and say, no, that's not correct. I talked to Charlie this morning, one of our customers, and he said XYZ, so you got to change that. And what people don't understand is that a persona is about commonalities across a segment of your buyers. And so what you're looking for is not the unique details that stand out, like Charlie drives a Corvette or whatever. Who cares if everybody else drives a station wagon and you write stuff about a Corvette? You're only going to engage Charlie. And so you're looking at these commonalities that cover a wider swath so that you can be as relevant as possible to the largest number of people, right? Salespeople can get into this one-to-one stuff, but marketers right now, we don't yet have that capability to be able to do that well, at least not on a programmatic basis. So we need to really be open to learning things that we might not have known about. And the only way to do that is by getting out there and actually talking to your customers. But the other thing is that I've heard persona practitioners say, do not invite sales into the process. Salespeople have no point in being in that process. And I think that's a big failing because, number one, they can bring a lot of insight from what they hear on the street. Number two, if we're going to generate leads that salespeople want to engage and pursue, we need to make sure that we match that up. So I had a project at one point where the marketing team chose the personas, did the work, didn't have sales involved in the project. And at the end, what they found out was their salespeople were not skilled to speak to prospects at the executive level. They were only skilled enough to speak to them at the director level. And so what we did was generate a bunch of leads and personas and content that was speaking to a group of prospects that the sales team was not prepared to engage. So that doesn't help either.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And it goes back, at least for me, this throwback thinking that, we're just going to be doing some bunch of ads, trade magazines, some brochures, and tell them all about us. And people haven't evolved into this day and age of, no, it's all about them and we have to understand them. And it just seems ludicrous to me that you would keep the marketers, the true story creators within your organization, away from a customer, and the salespeople, who are truly the storytellers within the organization, away from the customer, that you wouldn't want to have them understand them, as McKee would say, in a godlike way. That just baffles me.
Well, exactly. And when you think about this idea of story across the entirety of the buying process, at some point, salespeople in B2B need to pick up that story and continue telling it, not halt everything and go back to chapter 1 and start over because they have no idea what the prospect has already been engaged with throughout the story, right? So it's like, okay, you're on chapter 12 of a book and the next day you pick it up and you've lost your bookmark, so you have to start back at chapter 1, but you've already read all that stuff, so you're trying to catch up and you're getting frustrated, and eventually you put the book down and never finish it.
Right. I think about personas a little bit. In fact, I just sent a note to a friend of mine that runs a B2B company up out of the Pacific Northwest, and I'm helping him just kind of pull together a new sales platform. And one of the things I asked him, so I said, they don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of money. I said, but you've got to think about your customers like you would be an FBI profiler. And you need to go in, and instead of profiling a serial killer, you want to profile a serial customer and figure out what makes them tick. What to you are the good elements, the most solid elements for a persona, especially if someone doesn't have the budget to go out and hire someone to come in and do it? If they've got to do it themselves, what elements should they be looking for?
Well, there's some basic elements that all personas should have. And if you can't do an in-depth persona project, the things you want to find out are go and have conversations with their customers and learn about how they would talk about what they were trying to achieve and the problem they were solving when they started doing research to buy a solution like yours. What you really want to get to here to be relevant is, how do they talk about it? What words do they use? What was important to them? Where they went to get information, and what the outcome was they were expecting to get. How does that affect their career? Is it something that is it a company mandate they were responsible to? Is it responsible for providing the big outcome, or was it a stepping stone along the way to another outcome? Because that will help you figure out how to talk about it, how to build a story around what you're selling. So you really want to understand those things, but perhaps even more importantly, what got in their way? What stopped them from moving forward and made them think maybe this isn't the right thing to do? and what did they need to learn to overcome that. So you want to think about how do you remove obstacles from the path. But the other thing you want to really learn about is who else is involved. Who else came to them with pushback? Who championed it? What kinds of questions did they get asked internally? Because if you could provide that information and help them to get people on board and reach that consensus to keep moving forward, that's huge in their eyes. And you become then an enabler instead of just a vendor, right? And so you become their mentor, as we talked about earlier. So if you can just figure out kind of the context and the things they're trying to achieve and what's at the end of the road for them, as well as who else is involved, you've got a ton of fodder for how to create the story, how to create content that will be engaging for them. And my advice to a lot of companies is you don't have to, let's say there's 5 people in the buying process. You may not have the capability to build out personas for all 5 or content for all 5. If you only have the capacity to address one, then do that. But look at how the other people around them would engage with that person and how you can create content they can pass along to the others or what have you to help, facilitate that internal conversation, that internal consensus that has to take place. And so you can be really effective if all you can do is focus on one. But the best thing, if you're going to do it and you have very little resource, is to have some conversations with your customers.
Yeah, that's so smart. And approach those conversations, as I always preach, like an author would a book, just as if you were going to write their story about interacting with your brand and your services. What does that look like? And what do they go through as the character, as the protagonist, as the hero, as you pointed out, as the hero of this journey, via Joseph Campbell's monomyth? Look at it that way, just as if you're writing a book, and then you go in and share this with your marketing and sales team in the form of creative briefs and your personas to demonstrate that, we're all on journeys and we're all living stories. And a lot of business to business people don't want to hear that. They often will say, communications is that soft skill, especially when you're working in academia or very high level thinking technology. But I think what they fail to realize is how powerful this soft skill of communication and storytelling is. And it's not that these brands, in my experience, are changing and evolving and transforming into these great storytellers because they want to. I think they're finding out that they have to. And as you had mentioned and pointed out earlier, that marketers, for the most part, especially in the B2B realm, aren't trained to do this very well. They have to learn by the seat of their pants, the books they read, hopefully podcasts like this, and with tools, books that you've shared here through digital relevance, is to understand that first and foremost, we're all storytellers. And when we can really apply that, our true superpower of storytelling to business, especially in the B2B world, it can really move mountains. But it all starts with understanding that customer persona. I mean, it just, and the other thing I'll say to that, Ardath, is I'm fairly new to this too. I'm a big believer now in all the studies I've done on storytelling about customer personas, but I find it's hard. And when I get one done, I'm then forever questioning, did I ask the right questions? Is it informing the right story to come out? And I don't know that there's any shortcuts to this.
Well, there aren't. And, it's always interesting to me when a potential client will come to me and say, we only have so much budget, so skip the personas, just create the content strategy. And I say to them, so who are we talking to? And what do they care about? And they're like, well, just build the story, build the strategy out. What should we do? And it's kind of like trying to sail a ship around the world without a compass. So I honestly don't understand how you even address content strategy without a clear understanding of your buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take one more break for our wonderful sponsors and their stories. And when we come back, we'll wrap up with any advice you have for us about what are the next steps in our digital, becoming more digitally relevant and creating our personas. So we'll be back right after this. Did you know that on average, each of us sends around 10,000 emails each year? And what does each message include? Well, an email signature, right? Well, Angie's List realized the reach they had with their 270 employees and decided to use their email signatures to promote their flagship customer event called the Festival of Services. Angie's List dialed up Sigster to become mission control for its email signature campaign. In minutes, each employee had a Sigster-powered call to action in their email signature. In 6 months, the campaign had been viewed more than 2 million times, resulting in 4,500 visits to the registration portal, or 38% of all visits, which meant Sigster drove more engagement than any other tracked marketing activity. Now, if you want to ignite the most ubiquitous and overlooked promotional channel in your business from one simple platform, visit Sigster.com. That's Sigstr.com. And see how they will help you message, measure, and manage your email signature marketing. Hey, if it's good enough for Angie, it's good enough for me. Your customers, employees, marketing campaigns, partners, and yes, your detractors, they're each telling a story right now about you. Where? On social media, in traditional print publications, in blog posts, on television, basically everywhere. And it's happening 24/7, in real time. Your mission? Track these stories and the sources that share them, smartly manage them, analyze them rapidly, and discern what you should do next, what you should do now. No wonder you're tired. Well, Signal Labs is a real-time, cross-media story tracking platform that makes your life easier. Their solution enables customers to quickly spot trends, see relevant stories unfold, and take action. So stay ahead of what the world thinks with Signal Labs. Learn more and sign up for a free demo at signallabs.com/story. Welcome back to the Business of Story, and today's guest, Ardath Albee, a specialist in B2B marketing, especially digital relevance online. And we have been talking today all about the importance of knowing your audience in a godlike way through customer personas. So Ardath, do you have a story for us that really demonstrates how powerful customer personas can be in the B2B world?
Sure. One of my clients, a technology company selling a very high-ticket, complex technology solution, wanted to break into an industry that they weren't very well known in. And so we did the research and we created 3 buyer personas, and they were willing to commit to what they thought would take 3 years, given the complexity of the purchase and their newness in the industry, and that the industry was kind of a laggard in adopting technology. So they were willing to commit to 3 years to make a dent in this industry. And so we created the personas and we put together a nurture program, and we did a combination of lead generation to build the database as well as the nurture program, and rolled it out. And after about a year, we started seeing some really good engagement, and salespeople started reaching out to some of the more engaged prospects, but they couldn't get anything to happen. They weren't getting meetings. By the time we hit the 18th month, one of the salespeople gets a proactive outreach from one of the prospects who invites him to have a meeting. And the salesperson shows up for the meeting, and the prospect pulls out an article that he printed from our nurture program, held it out to the salesperson and said, "Show me how my company gets this." So we had finally reached that tipping point where the ideas had built the story enough that these prospects were becoming engaged enough to really think it was possible that they could get this end goal that we were talking about. And so that sale closed. It was a $5 million sale. And by month 24, they had closed 5 more sales at that price. So the entire campaign cost them a couple $100,000, and they had generated $30 million by the 24th month. And that actual program is still being updated and used today because we wrote it in a way that it could be evergreen. And so I think that's a pretty impressive story. And the other thing that it speaks to, which is really key in content marketing, is commitment. To keep going and keep doing it and not stop because we're not getting those fast, conversions and results that we think our campaigns are responsible for. or short-term campaigns. And so if you really look at addressing that entirety of the buying process, what you can do is see those results, but you have to stick with it. So what they found was instead of 3 years, 24 months to 2 years actually did it for them. And so that's also a benefit of telling the right story, is you can move people faster because they get it faster.
And you did characterize this with the C word, the campaign word, but it sounds to me more like, though, it was a lot longer journey than just a one-off campaign, that you were telling the story a lot of different levels, both online and off in person, to get them to that first big
I
complex
wouldn't call this
sale.
a campaign. I think I said that in relation to something else, but no, this was a solid lead nurturing and demand generation program.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear there. So for us remarkably busy, overwhelmed marketers that are still trying to learn all of this, you got some quick tips for us that we could use? We can hang up the phone on this podcast and I can go out and start doing this right away. What would you recommend?
Well, the first thing is do something to get to know your buyers. If you can't build a persona, do some interviews, do some research, talk to salespeople, do something to figure out what you can do to be more relevant. The next thing would be connect your content. All right. Think about it like serial storytelling. So if you post a tweet, they click on a link, they read a blog post, what comes next? Always give them something next. How do they continue the story if they were interested in that piece of content? And so we need to think about, how do we create that serial storytelling effect? And we can't just leave people hanging, because then what you end up with are drive-by views. They read your piece and they go, great, thanks for sharing, and they move on and nothing ever changes. So think about how you can connect the dots. And the third thing that I would say is think about how we can improve the way we hand off our leads to sales so that sales can step into the story at that point and they know how to continue moving it forward.
I love it. Serial storytelling versus the one-off campaigns. I just think it's fantastic. And the personas are at the heart of all of this, understanding who we're telling the story to and what do they care about and how do you get them to move to action. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Ardath, for being on the show, for being on Business of Story this week. I know you were extraordinarily busy. Highly recommend your book, Digital Relevance. And now I need to jump over and read your other book. Where do people get more information about you and your wonderful material?
It's all on my website at marketinginteractions.com.
marketinginteractions.com. And will you be speaking anywhere anytime soon that somebody might be able to pop in and see and hear you?
Yes, in a couple of weeks, I will be at Content to Conversion in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, just up the road. Well, we'll definitely have to get together and have a bite to eat
Absolutely.
while
I'm
you're
looking
here.
forward to it. And thanks so much for liking my books.
I love it. But now you've just made me feel poorly bad because I've got so much to do to get caught up on this stuff. It's really, really
thank
great
you so
content.
much. And just one step at a time. If you could just do one thing at a time to improve the way you come to market and the way you tell stories to your prospects, it'll all start rolling together and get that snowball effect.
Yeah, well, I love it. And thank you for sharing your wisdom today with our listeners. And thank you all listeners for tuning in to another episode of Business of Story. If you like what you're hearing here, please go to iTunes and give us those 5 little check marks there at on the stars and let us know what you like. And if you would like to reach out and have me cover some other topics, please shoot me a note at park@businessofstory.com. I would love to make this podcast all about you. So I want to understand your persona a little bit better and make this all work. And again, for storytelling tools, please go to businessofstory.com. You will find all of our podcasts there, plus a number of free downloadable storytelling tools. And one of our favorites, it's been fairly new over the last couple of months, but it's getting a lot of traction. And that's an online 10-step process that you can use right now. It takes you about an hour. It takes you through the story cycle process, and you can apply it to your own personal story, your professional story, your origin story, your brand story, your customer story. It is the same type process that has been inspired by Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, and you can do it all online, and you can find that at yourstory.businessofstory.com. So I encourage you to go and fill out your story and see how your story really can come together when you take a very intentional, pragmatic approach to it. And again, that story is not powerful unless you truly understand your audiences through the customer and buyer personas that you create. So thanks again for joining us. Return next week when we will have another amazing guest on Business of Story. And until next Wednesday, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Oracle Marketing Cloud, Park & Co., Sixter, Zignal Labs, and ACT, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by AudioBag.com.